Hi, friends. As promised from my last video, I will present my mini Gucci stash. I say a few because I don't have an extensive collection, but I do have an excessive amount of their bronzers. Oops. And as you know, I have their Luminous Matte blush, a pressed powder, and their eyeshadow palette. Full disclaimer, when I shopped for the Gucci blush in Nordstrom, I saw the current Gucci eyeshadow palette. There was a little voice in me that said, just get it, Alicia. I almost did, and I walked away. Because number one, I much prefer the design from last year's palette. There's an old world vintage feel about it with the black background and the roses on top. I don't know, it just invokes something very like sophisticated and elegant in me. With this year's palette design, it is also beautiful. It's on a pink overlay with the different flower bouquets, and the color story actually probably resonates with me more because of the taupe rose tone mattes they have in there. I briefly saw it, I don't know exactly, but and am I still thinking about it? Absolutely. And I feel Saks is having like a friends and family event. 15% is not a ton off $152. But we'll see. I'm still on the edge, but I'll show you this palette that I have. Now with the 3 bronzers, I didn't need to get all 3 bronzers, but I absolutely adore the compact. Leave it to Gucci for designing amazing makeup compacts in terms of the color choice, the gold trim. This is a huge compact, so you actually have the powder here, but then you have your puff underneath, which I rarely use, or rather, excuse me, it's a brush. The brush is still in its plastic sleeve. I have not used it. Why don't I try it? Curious to see. Oh, it's quite soft. Quite soft. I will still have it in its secret hideaway. As you see, I use my Sonergy Jumbo Bronzer to apply these bronzers. The reason why I have 3 was because I was intrigued by the color choices for their assigned skin tones. Let's start with number 2, for instance, which is supposed to be for light skin tones. I swatched it first and then applied it with the Jumbo Bronzer, and you can see the depth that number 2 has, which I thought odd for it to be a bronzer appropriate in Gucci Beauty's eyes for light skin tones. This gave me fast sculpt and depth, and I like the color on me because it is a bronzer and that it is brown tone, and although not as warm as other bronzers I have in my collection, is a warm neutral tone that adds obvious warmth but nice sculpt and dimension at the same time. I could have probably used a smaller brush if I wanted a more precise application, and the powder itself very smooth on the blend, silky to the touch. Disclaimer, these bronzer powders do have gold flecks in them, so just be careful that you don't over apply. I applied number 2 lightly because again, it does pack a lot of punch, as opposed to number 3 where I swatch next to number 2, assigned to medium skin tones, but this is lighter than the light skin tone bronzer. Explain, Gucci. Great color. Why I copped it, because I actually like this tone. It's not too neutral, not too warm. It sits right in the middle, but because it is significantly lighter, I apply a little more. And the danger you run into applying a little more of a powder like this that has the gold sparkles, you might see more gold sparkle on the blend, which I did. So I still used the same brush, but went in with a little more product because it was lighter. Overall, though, I enjoyed the color. It didn't have the same impact as number 2 in terms of the depth and the richness of that color. It was more moderate for the brown tone and the depth, but I still enjoyed the color. It's nice as a more low-key bronzing moment if I wanted just a touch of sun-kissed glow all over my face. I could have used the Jumbo Bronzer, the Face Pro, a number of brushes that I have in my arsenal that I think appropriate to use with number 2. number 3. I'm getting my numbers mixed up. Going into number 4, this was assigned to tan skin tones and has a lot more red in it and noticeable when swatched next to the other shades. But what I like about this color is that there's a ruddiness to it. It's not so red tone that it appears orange on my skin. It does provide a really nice sun-kissed feel to the skin, and I don't have to apply as much as I do number 3 because there's just much more color there. And I can compare this to number 2 with side-by-side footage. Number 2 is giving you more sculpt and contour, whereas number 4 is more of a truer bronze experience in my eyes, where it is providing that warmth, providing that sun-kissed burnt look with the color. And number 4 is a bronzer that I would probably pull a little lower than number 2 simply because of the undertone. I could get away with it as a mini blush moment, not oversaturating my cheeks with it, of course, keeping it higher towards the hollows and the cheekbones, but I could bring it down a little bit and it will still appear like a blush moment because of the color itself. So those are the 3 bronzers. If you were eyeing these and you are around my skin tone and you didn't quite know which one to buy because it was hard to make that distinction online, I have number 2 through 4. Outline the differences. Let me know which ones you're eyeing, if you already have them, what your thoughts are on them. Next, we have the beauty powder, the natural matte pressed powder. I have number 6, which very happy I chose. This was just based on a guess I did online. So hooray for me. It practically disappears on the back of my arm, which I know not an accurate marker for matching my skin tone, but ended up pretty good in terms of me applying this on top of the Hourglass Ambient Soft Glow Foundation in shade 11. It didn't change the color of the foundation, although it mattified it a little more. It didn't make my skin appear dry, dull, just kind of flat. So really nice powder if you want a little more set to your foundation and not disrupting the actual foundation itself in terms of the color. And my apologies for not mentioning this before, because Gucci is a luxury brand. Not to say all luxury brands have fragrance, but they usually do. I am happy to report that the fragrance itself is not overwhelming to my senses. When I apply these products, I smell it on the application, but it does not linger. But if you have a particular tremendous sensitivity to fragrance, I would stay away from the Gucci products, which is why I did not buy the foundation. I actually forgot what the response was for the foundation, but when it comes to makeup items taking over a bigger surface area on my face than just the cheeks like foundation could, I stay away because that could cause issues. And I actually applied the number 4 bronzer on top of number 6 pressed powder, and they worked well together before I applied number 2 and 3 on just the bare foundation. And I think that just speaks to the silky texture of the powder is finely milled, easy to apply, which leads us to their newly released complexion product, or should I say cheek product, their Luminous Matte blush. I had mentioned this in my foundation files video. Just to give you a sneak peek, I purchased the shade number 6 Warm Berry, which initially I did not have my eye on. It was the rose one, I think the number 5 shade. Super gray, super cool tone. I was so disappointed. There are other pinks in there that look gorgeous, and like the eyeshadow palette, I was eyeing those pinks, but my makeup vibe is shifting as we enter, or we're already in the autumn season. As we go deeper into the winter season, I prefer the wine berry and rose tone blushes, and Warm Berry is an excellent shade in terms of giving you sculpt, flush, and dimension all in one. As I mentioned in my previous video, I place it in the same category as Paradise Venus, the blush that does it all. And this tone is just so beautifully sophisticated. It's not too warm, not too bare, it's just right in the middle there. Enough red, enough pink, enough of that like plum that doesn't look muddy or bruising on the skin, and adore how it matches up with the Gucci bronzer. So on one side I applied it on number 4, the other side I applied it at number 3, and it flows lovely into these shades and presents a beautiful gradient of color. And I could place it lower on the cheeks, and again, the berry shade doesn't look too bruised up on the center of my face. It has really nice warmth to the undertone, which I think flattering not only for my complexion but will be for several others. And although it is matte, it doesn't look dry on the skin. It is labeled as a luminous matte blush, I think because the powder is finely milled, very soft on the skin. So when you buff it on, at least behind, luminous finish, not in terms of sparkle and shine, but just skin-like, and again, a radiance about it that gives life to the complexion and doesn't look dry on the cheeks. I did apply the highlighter from the Hourglass, I say Tiger palette, but this is palette 1, the curation that was designed for like the medium part of the spectrum of skin tones. I applied this highlighter, and now we come to the eyeshadow palette. I forced myself that's such a strong word to use. I brought this along to Bay's house and wanted to use it over the weekend before I filmed with it because I haven't used this palette in a long time. Since I had my eye on the current one, I was like, look, you haven't used the first palette. It's just been sitting there. Full transparency, I bought this palette just for the aesthetic. The shadows in here are not worth $152. I think I just spent money on the compact, the design, the name. Even though these shadows are made in Italy, they're not so mind-blowingly better than other shadows in my collection. I just wanted this palette. And when you open it, you can take out the actual palette. There's a groove here, so when you're actually doing your makeup, you don't have to hold the entire palette, and this reattaches quite easily, I should say, just snaps back in. So the design is practical in that sense, but the shadows themselves are not, you know, crazy in your face different from what you probably already own. Just a few notes about the textures in here. The mattes are quite powdery, but blend easily on my skin. They don't present any problems in terms of skipping or making my eye crease region look uneven. I would identify some of these textures like a satin matte. They're very soft, don't provide a lot of crazy punch in color. I would primarily layer these over the matte or just dust them on the lid through the crease and under the lash line for like a one color look. There's one shade in here, I think that's supposed to be like a pink like duochrome, but it's super flaky. It's this one here. You have to wet this shade to get a little something from it, otherwise you'll be sorely disappointed. The purple cool, and it's smooth enough again. You can wear it on the lower lash line, inner corner, lower inner lash line. I like to just whip this all over because it's soft enough texture-wise that you could blend the edges without having to use a matte. This blue powder matte, pretty cool to wear either on the lid, inner lower lash line, or even as like an inner corner highlight moment if you wanted. The most sparkly shade in here is this silver, and I say that because it does boast the most shine. And if you feel it odd to have it in here with these shades, I wore it actually with the red tone matte, this on the lower inner part of my lash line, and it turned out pretty good. I don't know how it worked out, but it was fine. You got your pink matte and this off-white matte here. That's nice to have as inner corner highlight if you wanted. So I just wanted to do two looks, showing you a little bit of the versatility of this palette if you have it. Not so much for you to buy it, but if you are like me, and you have this palette and you bought it just for it to look pretty on your vanity, it can be used and the eye looks are actually pretty. So with that said, I think it's time for you to come in a little closer. That's enough. I applied my Linda Crease No More eye primer, and why don't I start off with a brush that I find advantageous to use with these types of textures. I had the Jumbo Blender with me over the weekend, but allow me to grab the Worker one. It's a similarly designed brush. I'm picking up this like plum shade here, whipping that across my lid, not taking it too high just yet as I want to pounce the color on. And again, there is some sheen to it, but the texture is very soft where you can buff the edges easily without the presence of a matte. And because it is so soft, I think it's fairly simple to blend. This is a very low skill using palette. I feel like if you are a makeup beginner, these are quite easy to use. I placed that same color under my lash line, but what I like to do is, just out of habit, is to take a blending brush And you can choose any of the mattes here, but I'll choose the more neutral taupe matte and refine the edges of that plum satin shade, just bringing it around so it can appear smoother on the blend. And that's it. That's where I stopped. I think I did this on Saturday, and it's low committal, not difficult to achieve. You can even apply this with your finger and like fluff the edges with your finger and be fine. If you wanted to use this shade, I would highly recommend that you wet it. Otherwise, again, you'll be sorely disappointed. Wetting the flaky pink shade is going to bring out a little more of that reflectivity in the formula. So it has a stronger neon pink than it would otherwise applied dried. And you can scatter that across the plum shade if you wanted, overlay it so it can have that gradient. And you still have this portion left. If you wanted, you can apply a little more of the pink. Why not? Let's go in with the purple and place that on the inner part of the lower lash line. So now you have that purple shade in the mix. It doesn't overtake the look, I think enhances it. And if you were not comfortable wearing the purple shade all over your lid, well, you could just put it right there. If you wanted to go more simple, why don't we apply this color here, this more neutral brown shade. Again, not groundbreaking in terms of the color, but nice to have in a palette with different shades and textures, where if you just wanted something simple thrown in your crease to add shadow, dimension, a little more contrast to the eyes, and the texture is pretty easy to blend. And I do like the tone of this brown. It's not overly smoky, where I feel like I can't apply this by itself. I only could apply it on the outer corner. If you wanted, you could place a little more of the red on the inner part of the eye. What I like to do is take this more like lilac satin shade with my finger and place it on the lid. And I think that's a great combination with the more neutral matte brown, because although this is cool tone, I think it a really pretty color. And why not, if you didn't want to place the pink on the inner corner again, you could take the off-white matte and place that on the inner corner. Now, as I had mentioned, be careful, these are powdery, and because of that, a lot can get picked up. So maybe use a smaller brush or not pick up as much as I did. I just went in more with the lilac shade to kind of offset that application, but you can still see the highlight there. For the lower lash line, I'll just place the brown matte here, and I wanted to go in with the silver metallic because I think this is really pretty, not only as an inner corner highlight, but also a lower inner lash line moment. Again, this is the color that has the most sparkle and punch. And the black is here to stamp along your lash line if you wanted more intensity and definition. Again, be careful in picking the shade up because it is powdery. You don't want to have fallout, especially if you already have done your face makeup. But that's going to give the lash line a little more volume when you apply your mascara. And I just like to pull mine out a little bit, just a little tail of a wing. Yeah. And again, black shadow is pretty good in terms of placing it on your lash line. But if you wanted to stamp some on the outer lid for a more prominent smoke moment, you most certainly can. And if you wanted to do the blue shade, just as a quick idea, you can do this on the crease, that on the lid, and maybe that on the inner corner, just to have a different moment of a highlight, but with the blue. And I could show you, I already have the white on, but if you wanted to place the blue on instead, that's going to change the look a little bit, but why not? I think it's a lot of fun to have blue on the inner corner, and we already have the cool lilac shade on the crease. And if you wanted more of that lilac shade in the crease, you could just place it over that first brown shade we did. Why not? It doesn't have to stay low. And because the brown is underneath, it's going to ground it a little bit. And you'll have that sparkle higher on the eye, but who cares? I think it's still pretty. Just placing a little more of that silver here. All right. let's apply some lashes and I'll be right back. So here are a few close-up shots of our final look. You can peek at the bronzer and the blush as well as the eye looks. And I enjoyed this palette when I used it over the weekend, and I have been continue using it after that. And again, I didn't buy this palette to be mind blown about the shadows, the colors, and the textures, but I do appreciate the ease of use with this palette. It doesn't have too much texture. It's like not overly saturated with like the glitzy glam. As much as I love the multi-chromes, the astral shades from Pat McGrath, sometimes I just want to slap something on that's easy, that's going to deliver a little bit of smoke like the plum satin does. It delivers like that perfect daily haze that sometimes is hard to achieve. Like for instance, when I use the Dream palette, I have to stay away from Aspiration, that dark brown shade, because it can get smoky very fast. So I just stick to the more medium tone shades in the palette. But it's nice to have these tones, again, that are not so in your face pigmentation wise, that just provide that beautiful wash of color and is easy to blend, very soft and silky. If I wanted to add a little more, I could use the brown or just use the black to stamp along the lash line. And the blue is great for an inner corner highlight moment if you wanted to mix it up and not use something more neutral. But again, I really like it and I wanted to use it because if I ever thought about buying the second Gucci palette, I better have used this a lot until then. And although those shades look gorgeous, I'm very happy with the palette I already have. Again, if you have this and you haven't touched it, you really didn't want to use the shades because you were like, blah, they're okay. Yeah, they're all right. Absolutely, they're not the super bestest in the world, but from what I've experienced over the weekend and what I see now is not too bad. It's not too bad. The $152 price tag, believe me, was just for the palette component because this is heavy, and the design, I'm sure, the brand name, just look at the detailing work on this. Is absolutely gorgeous. So I hope this video helped, fam. I wanted to show you the different swatches, the comparisons. Oh, and I have Susan Nude on from their satin lipstick formula. You know I love my Penny Beige, but Susan Nude is pretty. It's not as warm as Penny Beige. It's a little more neutral on me, which I think makes for a great beige lipstick moment if I didn't want too much warmth on the lip. Let me know if you picked up any of these products. If you've been eyeing the new Gucci eyeshadow palette, you're gonna pick it up, let me know down below. I'll see you down in those comments. And until then, that is a wrap. Thank you all so much for watching. I hope this video helped. And if you like this video, please give it a thumbs up or maybe consider subscribing to my channel. And until then, I will see you on here again with another review tutorial, Gucci Beauty Extravaganza, or maybe Suku Pre-Holiday 2022. I'm gonna film that next. Take care, and I'll see you again soon.